Confidence is not a fluke. Confidence is a choice, and it begins with your mindset. In this podcast, you will get all sorts of mindset tools to help you reduce self criticism and overwhelm while increasing your empowerment and courage. I am passionate about helping women decrease their mental drama and increase their self awareness while leaving behind all the perfectionist tendencies. We do so by empowering ourselves one episode at a time. I am Olga, your host, former therapist, life coach, blissfully an IVF mother, and this is the Journey to Happy podcast. Hey guys, happy Monday, and welcome to another episode of the Journey to Happy podcast. I'm Olga, your host, and today in this episode, we're going to be talking about failure and whether it actually is failing. So I'm going to describe to you why I'm talking about this in this episode. And we're actually going to dive into why is it that we all really want to avoid failure. And we're going to contemplate the idea of perhaps failure just being another lesson that we learn and not an actual missing the mark experience. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to work with me for the next 12 weeks, starting September 26th, ending, I think, the week of December 21st, inside Reset Your Mindset, which is a 12-week program designed to help women stop overthinking, stop all the self-doubt and all the mental drama that prevents them from living life fully and intentionally and happier. So if that speaks to you, head over to the show notes and check the link of Reset Your Mindset and get yourself in that waiting list because the applications will open soon and only for a couple of days. Spaces are definitely limited to that group coaching program. Okay, so let's talk about why I'm even talking about failure. I was recently being coached by my life coach, and we were talking about my goals. And I was telling her how I felt this sense of anxiety when I was asked by my coach to have a very concrete goal. In this particular case, my goal had like a very specific number. So I wanted to help these many people. And having to narrow down my goal to a number, a specific number, gave me anxiety. And so we were there to explore why that was. Unbeknown to me, I had this idea that if I didn't meet my mark, if I didn't get to the number of clients that I wanted to have for this particular project, that would be a failure, that I would have missed the mark, and that would be a failed attempt. And as we were talking and discussing what was happening, I became like I had a flashback of my 5 years of infertility and the lesson that I learned then that I clearly completely forgot about and needed to be reminded of. And I'm sure this happens to you guys where you feel that you're experiencing a whole new life experience. And when you get to the lesson of that life experience, you're like, wasn't I supposed to have learned this a few years ago when this happened to me? And so I think that's the beauty of life. When we need to be reminded of an old lesson learned, it gets presented to us by a life experience. And that was the case for me. And I was so inspired after my coaching session. I took notes, and that is what I'm talking to you guys about. So my ideal client is, as you already know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, I call her the pre-Oprah. She has this potential of being magnificent like Oprah, to shine right in her area of genius, whether that's being a stay-at-home mom, being an executive, being an artist, it doesn't matter. Your gift needs you to be so dedicated to it and be so free from distractions and mental drama that you can then dive into that gift and shine bright like Oprah has. So I call her the pre-Oprah. But she's also very driven by goals, and she is wanting to do things in a very perfect way. And that's when her mind gets into trouble. Now, if you haven't realized that, I am a pre-Oprah myself, and that is why I like coaching people who are just a few steps behind me, and I can show them the discoveries and the things that I'm mastering. Enough of the pre-Oprah, but why this is relevant to this episode is because I feel I felt when I was going into this coaching call that I was in a rush to make it to my goal and that I was quitting too soon before my goal was even here. Before I even started working towards my goal, I was quitting, at least energetically and emotionally, on the goal because a part of my brain had already agreed that failure would not feel good and therefore it should be skipped and avoided. And so just reflect for this for a second for yourself. How many times, if you ever have you lower your goals or expectations or not even done them at all? You haven't accomplished the goal. You've quit on even setting the goal or being really specific on the goal because you assumed you had a thought that said you might fail at this and you just told yourself, oh, well, I couldn't possibly feel that feeling. So I'm just going to skip it altogether. I can tell you for myself, I've done that several times. And thankfully for me, it hasn't ever stopped me from still accomplishing many goals. But I can see and I can understand how that has been a repetitive pattern in my life. And if that is for you as well, you're going to enjoy this episode because I'm going to walk you through what I walk myself through and what I have walked myself through so many times in my life. Failure is not a familiar feeling for me because I turn it around so quickly to grab the lessons. And this is where we're going. Okay. So think of your goal. Think of any goal you have. Happy marriage, losing weight, running a marathon, having great communication skills. Just think of a goal. Okay. And think of how clear you are on by when you want this goal to be done. Do you have a date in mind, or if it is a specific number of like you're running a marathon, like how long of a marathon, like half marathon or a full marathon, or is it a 10K? And when are you signing up for that? And when is it happening? And when does the training begin? I don't know you, but many of us become really vague when we're setting a goal so that we don't have to commit, so that we don't have to fail. So first things first, if you're setting a goal, if you're thinking of your goal, notice if there's a lack of clarity and a lack of preciseness on what your goal is and by when and how and when does it start. And if you really want to do this work, pause me here, okay? And write down your goal and make it be really, really specific. And then write down all of your feelings about having even set this goal for yourself. So if you're saying that you want to run 21 kilometers by September, I want you to think of all the thoughts that come along as you're thinking of that by September. So I can tell you that for my goal, I had the following thoughts. I've never done this before. If I could, I would have already done it. Maybe my expectations are above my capabilities. And this one shocked me. You ready? I am a failure. And that's when I knew I needed coaching on this. Also, when I knew I was personalizing my goals, I was making them mean something about myself. As I was getting coached, I realized that I have a self concept that says, I make shit happen. And while that's really powerful for my self concept to have, I needed to reframe that a bit, to take a step back and notice that I can make shit happen, even if it takes me longer than I anticipated. So many times we identified failure because we didn't run the 10 kilometers by the time we said we were at the speed we said we were. And we look at that life experience as a full on failure versus a lesson. What did we learn? How fast can I actually run? How long did I train? What would I need to do to train? Or what would I need to do in my training preparation to get it to the time and speed that I actually want to be running by? And so this is what became so evident for me in my own processing. Time, waiting, patience. We understand failure as such because we give it a time frame, and if it doesn't happen in that time frame, it then must be a failure. But what if we set our goal with so much clarity, with concrete numbers, with concrete dates, with a concrete plan, and if we don't meet the mark exactly, that we can still appreciate the steps that we took and we can take it as an evaluation what we will do different. And in fact, I invite you to do that early on. If you think to yourself, okay, my goal is to have a really happy marriage with my current husband, think of yourself like, what would it make? What would it take to make it there? And what obstacles could we face that could really separate us from making it to that goal? And how would I have to problem solve? What if you begin to problem solve for that failure that might happen in the future? What if you begin to plant the seeds of, no, this is how I would do it, so that that outcome doesn't happen? So what if you were to not quit too soon before you fail, which is what I was tempted to do and what I see so many of my clients do? We quit before failure arrives so that we skip it. We just didn't fail. And as I was being coached, I told my coach I'm having flashbacks of when I was trying to conceive, to make my baby. Because no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much, the goal was clear and the date and the time, I wanted to have this baby now. We kept failing at it. And it really felt like a personal failure. I was failing at making a baby. The IVF treatment failed. Everything felt like a failure to me at the time. And I often tell my clients that I support through fertility that if somebody would have shown me the future and would have told me, hey, every trial, it's teaching us something about your body, about the process to succeed. And guess what? Eventually, all that information combined will give you the most beautiful in the outside and in the inside human as a son. What would have happened then? Would I have looked at those quote unquote failed attempts as failures? Or would I have still gone through all of those trials, but with this conviction that each of those so thought failed attempts were actually steps that I needed to take to finally make it to meet the most beautiful human I've ever met? You know what? When I think of myself that way, when I ask myself those questions, I think I would have gone through all the steps. There was no one step I wouldn't have taken, because ultimately, even those so thought as failed attempts brought me to him, but I would have done them with so much more joy, with so much more patience. I was using waiting and failed attempts against me instead of with me, for me. So here's what I want to offer to you if you are like me, avoiding failure and having zero patience for waiting till you get it right 100%, which is all of my clients. So if you guys are listening, this is for you, from my heart to yours. I want you to ask to yourself, what would it actually mean to fail? Why is my brain making this a problem that I don't meet my goal, whatever that goal is? Why is it that my brain is making it a problem? And if I go through this trial towards my goal and I don't make it, I don't quite make it, or I don't make it as successfully as I wanted to, what did I learn in that process? What worked? What didn't? And how can I use that as I begin again? Did I quit too soon, assuming I was going to fail? And if so, what is it that I was really trying to avoid? And this is what's really hot, okay? Failure is not an emotion. Failure is a perception. It's thoughts that we're choosing to have about a life experience. Going back to my IVF experience, I never saw it as a failed IVF because it taught us so much about my body. And so the next rounds of IVF, we already had something we didn't have before. And the one after, same thing. And but by the fifth round I did of IVF, I was in so much alignment and happy energy because I already knew all the things. I knew what I was going for and what I was going to get out of it. So here's what I want you to think about to yourself. This is homework for you guys. Imagine a podcast episode that gives you homework. I want you to ask, what feeling arises to my body when I think, I have the thought that I'm going to fail at X goal? What is the feeling that I have when I think I'm going to fail? And then I want you to sit, what I call inside my Reset Your Mindset module, sit in the mud with that feeling. So feel that feeling. Don't skip it. Don't move on to a different goal. Don't quit. Feel that emotion. That's what you're trying to avoid, feeling an emotion. So before you move to change your perception about failure, not being a failure, but being something else, choosing other thoughts, you must process the emotion that your current thoughts give you about failing and failure. Your mind is going to want you to push it aside, to skip it, to rush through so that you don't feel this emotion. But I need you and you need yourselves to tell the brain it is safe to feel this emotion and I'm going to sit with it. And once you felt all the possibilities of failing in your body physically, like where do you feel it in your body? I want you to then come up with a new perception of failure. And I want to invite you to have a perception of failure that is inviting and exciting. My mentor used to say there aren't failures, there are wins and lessons. So either you win, you made it exactly, or you learned. And so your next attempt might likely be a win. And if not, then have patience because you're going to have to keep doing it until you figured out all the things that work and that don't work for you. And it's important for you to notice where are you making this so-called failure personal? How are you making it mean something about your perception of self, your self-concept? Because when we make it personal, we have zero interest in changing that, in looking at it. We feel afraid of looking at it because what does that say about me? But can we all agree that my fertility journey doesn't say anything about me? My self-concept can remain the same. I am a healthy, strong woman. I am going to be a mother. That could have remained the same regardless of these failed attempts at conceiving. So, where are you making it personal? And what is your self concept? What is your self concept in general? What are the thoughts you have about yourself? And how can you have a new self concept that allows you to look at these attempts that don't meet quite the mark yet? Who do you want to be when you're learning to make it to your goals? That is part of your self concept. So, the self concept that you want to have about yourself, you want to include the who you want to be while you're trying to figure things out. What you haven't mastered that goal. If you're learning to speak in public and you want to make sure your goal is that the first time you speak, you're going to have zero anxiety. And then you go and talk and you have some anxiety, even though you followed all the steps, rather than seeing that as a failure. Like, what did I learn? What worked? What didn't? And notice how that's going to prepare you even better for the next attempt at speaking in public. So the self-concept will have to be, I am the person who gets to speak publicly, anxious-free, or managing that anxiety. So is failure really a failure? Remember, failure is a perception. So what perception do you want to have about failure? How willing are you to sit in the discomfort of that emotion that is brought to you by the perception of failure? And before you go to change your perception of failure and self-concept, please process by feeling the emotion that failure makes you feel. Clients ask me, what do you mean by sitting with it? Literally sit down, notice where this emotion is being felt in your body and feel it. Breathe through it. Your body's going to want to jump out of your skin. You are going to contain it. It is safe to contain it. It is safe to feel all emotions. And once you do, they lose their power. For the scary ones, they're like, oh, it's like opening the closet and seeing the monster that you think is in the closet. And the monster loses all its scary power when he feels seen in the eyes and no reaction. The child is not screaming. The child is like, oh, hi, monster. I see you. So it's not like the monster stops existing, but it is that the monster that no longer has this fearing effect on you, the child, opening that closet and seeing in. So it would be the equivalent of having failure show up and you look at failure and think, oh, I see you. I feel your energy, your emotion. And once that is processed and is not as fearful, you can begin to change that perception. All right, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. More of this, a lot more of this inside Reset Your Mindset, which is why I think you should jump in and work with me. It's 12 weeks and zero risk involved. It costs $2,000 Canadian for the 12 weeks. You get to pay this on a monthly basis. And if you don't get your results, your money is guaranteed back to you. Bye now.